This video is going to walk you through long division, 4-digit divided by 1 digit. Once again, I have written down two problems, one that will have a remainder and one that will not. And I have also written down our steps for long division, which you will notice are the same steps that we used for 2-digit divided by 1 digit and 3-digit divided by 1 digit. So I'm going to start with the first problem that will have no remainder, and my first step is divide. So I need to ask myself, how many times can 3 go into 4 without going over? I know that 3 can go into 4 one time without going over. So then I multiply 3 times 1, which equals 3. Then I'm going to subtract 4 minus 3, which equals 1. My next step is to bring down the next digit, which is the 3. So now I am going to repeat my steps. So I'm now going to ask myself, how many times can 3 go into 13 without going over? I know that 3 can go into 13 4 times without going over. So now I need to multiply. 3 times 4 equals 12. When I subtract 13 minus 12, 3 minus 2 is 1, and 1 minus 1 is 0. So now I need to bring down my next digit, which is a 2, and I need to ask myself, how many times can 3 go into 12, because I am repeating my steps again, so I am back up to division. I know that 3 can go into 12 4 times. 3 times 4 equals 12. So now I'm going to subtract 12 minus 12, which is 0. My last step is to bring down the last digit. So now I have to ask myself, how many times can 3 go into 6 without going over, or what is 6 divided by 3? I know that 3 can go into 6 2 times without going over. So then I multiply 3 times 2, which equals 6. Now when I subtract 6 minus 6, I am left with 0. Since I have no other digits to bring down from the top, my answer is 1,442 with no remainder. As I move on over to a problem that will have a remainder, again, go back to my first step, divide. 5 divided by 4, or how many times can 4 go into 5 without going over? I know that 4 can go into 5 one time without going over. So now I multiply. 4 times 1 equals 4. When I subtract 5 minus 4, I get 1. My next step is to bring down the 2. So now I have to ask myself, how many times will 4 go into 12, because I am repeating my steps? So I know that 4 can go into 12 3 times without going over. So now I multiply 4 times 3, which equals 12. Now I must subtract 12 minus 12, which equals 0. My next step is to bring down the next digit, which is a 1. Now this is where it can get tricky. I have to ask myself, how many times can 4 go into 1? Well, 4 is larger than 1. So I know that 4 cannot go into 1 because there is nothing I can multiply by 4 to get me an answer of 1. So I must put a 0 up here. So now I multiply 4 times 0, which is 0, and then I subtract. 1 minus 0 equals 1. My last step is to bring it down. So I'm bringing down that last 0, so I now have 10. And I asked myself, how many times can 4 go into 10 without going over? I know that 4 can go into 10 2 times without going over. So then I multiply 4 times 2, which equals 8. Now I must subtract 10 minus 8, which will equal 2. And my last step is to bring it down, but I have no other digits left to bring down. I cannot forget about this 2 down here. So my answer is 1,302 with a remainder of 2. Now remember, if you come across a problem where the number on the outside is larger than the first number, then you have to combine the first 2 digits. So let me show you an example as I did in the 2 divided by 1, sorry. So if I were to do 3,709 divided by 5. Well, my first step would be to ask myself how many times can 5 go into 3, but I know that 5 cannot go into 3 because 5 is larger. So I have to ask myself how many times can 5 go into 37. And I know that 5 can go into 37 7 times. Now I just do the same steps. So I do 5 times 7, which is 35. And then I need to subtract 37 minus 35. When I do that, 7 minus 5 is 2, and 3 minus 3 is 0. So now I have to bring down my next digit, which is the 0. So I have to ask myself, how many times can 5 go into 20? And I know that 5 can go into 20 4 times without going over. So then I multiply. 5 times 4 equals 20. When I subtract 20 minus 20, I get 0. So now I bring down my last digit, which is a 9. And I have to ask myself, how many times can 5 go into 9 without going over? And I know that 5 can go into 9 1 time without going over. 5 times 1 is 5. And now I must subtract 9 minus 5, which is 4. Since I have no other digits to bring down, my answer is 741 with a remainder of 4. So remember, if your outside digit is larger than your first digit on the inside, then you combine the 2 digits and ask yourself, how many times can 5 go into 37? Remember, keep practicing those math facts.